Hello everyone, my name is Heather and welcome to the channel Bookables. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 3 recent reads that I have read, you guessed it, recently. As always with these videos, I'm going to tell you what the book is about, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and my rating. As always, there will be timestamps down below if you want to hear about one book in particular. Without further ado, I'm going to tell you what books I will be talking about today. First one, I just want to preface by saying I have looked up, I have listened to how to pronounce this correctly, I have practiced, and I will for sure still mess it up. So just know that I try to do my best intentions, like I try to say it, and yeah. The first book is The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina. Hopefully I pronounced it right, by Zordita Cordova. I really tried on that one. This is an adult standalone fantasy book. I have Every Last Summer by Carly Fortune. This is an adult romance. And then I have a classic, and that is Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. So we have a lot of different genres going on here, so let's get into it. So the first book I want to talk about is the one that I just have a really hard time pronouncing, and that is The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I read this book because it was on my list of 22 books I want to read in 2022. I made it a goal this year to really try to focus on backlist books because I have noticed the past couple years in particularly, I have really focused on new releases every single month and have put backlist books on the burner, like on the back burner. And this year I was like, you know what, I want to like not just really focus on new releases. I want to read books that have been on my shelf for a while or books that I've been meaning to read but haven't gotten around to. And this is one of them. This one came out like as a book of the month pick, I want to say a year or two ago, and it sounded interesting to me. I never picked it up, and when I was compiling my list, I was like, oh yeah, that book sounds interesting. I would like to read it, and here we are. So I read this one, and I went into it with not a lot of expectations because number one, I don't read a lot of adult fantasy, and number two, I didn't really know a ton about it, but I have to say, I was blown away by this book. So this book is going to be very hard to explain. So it's a standalone fantasy book, which is a great thing I love about it. Fantasy, in particular the genre, it comes with a lot of series. You know, when you start one book, you might as well just put yourself in because you're going to be in the ride for like 6 or 7 books usually. And I don't love that necessarily. I love that when I was a lot younger. Now I'm like, I'm kind of a one and done person when it comes to books because kids. But anyway, I love the fact that it's a standalone fantasy. So what this book is about, it is about Orquidea Divina. And so Orquidea is a character in this book. She is a grandmother, a mother, and basically at the beginning of this book, she sends out this letter to all of her children and her grandchildren telling her that she's going to be passing soon to come home to her home in Four Rivers to collect their inheritance. So basically that's kind of where the book begins. We really follow 4 characters in this book, if you will. Like I said, I'm going to butcher the synopsis because it is a very intricate book to explain. So we have all of these grandkids and kids that come back to Orquidea's home in Four Rivers, and they're coming to collect their inheritance. They haven't seen their grandmother in a long time. And from there we follow 3 of the grandchildren very closely. I forget their names already, I'm horrible. We have Marimar, Ray, and Rhiannon. And basically we follow these 3 cousins, and after their grandmother has passed, they have noticed that their family, the Montoyas, are kind of dying one by one, and they can't figure out why. They think there's maybe a curse upon them. To go back to Orquidea's root place, Ecuador, to try to figure out more about her, because Orquidea is a very secretive person. You don't know much about her. She has a very strained relationship with her children and grandchildren, but this whole book is about her past. The 4th person in this book is about Orquidea herself, of how she came to be Orquidea. You know, how she grew up in Ecuador, how she managed to move all the way to USA in this middle of nowhere town called Four Rivers and establish her home and like that. So basically, I'm going to try to read you. It says that 7 years later, her gifts have manifested because she has left gifts with her inheritance into different ways for Marimar, Ray, and Rihanna, granting them unexpected blessing and powers. But soon a hidden figure begins to tear through their family tree, picking them off one by one as it seeks to destroy Orquidea's life. Determined to save what's left of their family and uncover the truth behind their inheritance, her descendants travel to Ecuador, to the place Orquidea buried her secrets and broken promises and never looked back. So basically, this book, it just sounds like when you hear about it, like it sounds intriguing, but you're still like, what the crap? I love this book, needless to say. It was very lyrical. It was also steeped in magical realism. Like, oh my goodness. Like, Orquidea was kind of like a witch, if you will. She could do different things. Her pantry never ran out. She threw salt on the floor. She did all of these things. And especially with the gift she leaves her grandchildren, it's very steeped in magical realism. And going back to Orquidea's life, it is just a book that's about magical realism, about family and ancestry, and also about overcoming a lot of adversity, because Orquidea had a very, very tough life, and none of her kids or her grandkids knew it because she was that secretive. And I don't know how to explain it, but I loved it. I loved the mess out of it. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did, but I found myself engrossed by the story, engrossed by these Montoya children and grandchildren, exactly. And each one I was very invested in. Like, I was invested in all of their lives and how they came to be. I loved learning more about Orquidea. That was probably my favorite part of the whole book, about how she came to be in Four Rivers. And it was just a stunning book. I'm not doing justice by explaining it poorly. I just want to say that right now. So maybe perhaps go on Goodreads and look at some reviews where they're much more in depth and much more analytical and much more better about reviewing it than me. But all I have to say is I gave it a 5 out of 5. I loved every second of it. I loved that it was standalone fantasy. The writing was beautiful. I love the message of family that it brought, the ancestry, and I just love kind of the magical realism of it. So if you want a book that's kind of like fantasy, yes, but very much kind of an urban fantasy where it's set in, you know, modern day times, not in a fantastical world and things like that, this is a great book for you. I have not heard barely anybody talk about this, which is a shame because I loved it so much, and for sure will be on my favorites book of the year. Right now it might be number 1. I liked it that much. I loved it that much. I'll just say that. So hands down, loved it. Highly recommend it. Can't stop gushing about it. You'll probably hear me talk about this a ton, honestly. The next book I want to talk about is an adult romance, and that is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. This is a debut book, and it's a romance book, like I said. And this book is a kind of not your typical like rom-com book that I usually read. It's more of like kind of a sweeping love story. If I could compare it to another book, I would compare it to Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, because they have very similar plots. Where this book in particular is about a character named Persephone. Is that how you said that? Or Persephone? Yes, but everyone calls her Percy. And basically she lives in Canada, and her family is pretty rich, and they decide to buy like a lake house for every summer. So they go and buy a lake house in this very small town called Barry's Bay, which is a real place actually that the author has been to every single year. And so they move in for the summer, and they meet the neighbors who it's a widowed mom, and she has 2 teenage boys named, I forget their names already, Sam and Jamie, I want to say. And basically, they live there year round. So this whole book is about Percy and Sam and their friendship and how they came to be friends, and obviously something more. So in this book, the whole thing is Percy and Sam have not talked to each other in 12 years. And then she learns that Percy's mom has died. So she goes back to Barry's Bay and confronts Sam and what happened 12 years ago. So like, that's a long time. And so you have flashbacks, you have obviously what's going on right now with the funeral, and then you also get like 15 summers ago, 17 summers ago, and things like that. And I have to say, again, I went into this with no expectations, and I really enjoyed it. It really solidifies the fact that I love kind of sweeping love stories. Like, I love a good rom-com where it's steamy and just fun and stuff like that, but I also love like a good grand love story, you know, where they were friends for so long, something happened, and then they're finally confronting their feelings. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, but the more I think about it, I might give it a 5 out of 5 because I still remember so much about it, and I have such vivid memories of it and good memories of it. I enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed Percy's and Sam's relationship and how it felt very organic, because Percy definitely had a very unrequited, she thought, love of Sam, and she didn't think he felt the same way, which clearly you could tell while reading this book that he definitely did. How she did not see that, I don't know. But you know, I loved reading about that. They both really grew. This does have a big, like, I will say, with the thing that drew them apart, you're either gonna like forgive a character or you're never gonna forgive a character in this book. I don't want to spoil it by any means, but you know, I don't know, but I will say I definitely could see it coming. I still enjoyed it. I thought it was a great summer read. If you just want a great book to take with you to the beach, the lake, or just read in the summer about like childhood best friends that become lovers and then something happens that makes them estranged and then maybe they have a second chance at romance, I would recommend this one. I'm definitely going to recommend this for summer reads because I enjoyed it. I really liked it. It does have some steamy scenes. I was not expecting any, but whoa, there was a couple that I was like, okay, was not expecting it. So just so you know, yes, it's a grand sweeping love story, but also there's some steamy times in it as well, just so you're, I really loved it. Honestly, 5 out of 5, wasn't expecting that. And the last book I read is Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. If you haven't heard of Agatha Christie, I don't know, she's a famous mystery thriller writer. This is a classic. Again, this was on my list of 22 books I wanted to read in 2022. And I have to say, I enjoyed it. This is my second Agatha Christie book I have read, And Then There Were None. And Then There Were None is a standalone book. Like, this is part of her, I don't know how I'm going to pronounce this character's names. It's part of the Herculean Poirot mysteries. He's a famous like detective guy. I think of kind of like Sherlock Holmes, if you will. And this is like the 17th book in the series, I want to say. So yeah, I think you can read them separately. Honestly, I did, and that's totally fine. I really wanted to read this one because it's a very popular Agatha Christie book, and they just did an adaptation, and I really actually want to watch the adaptation. I know, a shocker, because I'm horrible with adaptations, but I do want to watch it. So now I can officially watch it, and I have to say, I enjoyed this more than And Then There Were None. I think because of the character, oh my gosh, Herculean, I forgot to look up the pronunciation of this one, so I'm already failing for this video immensely. But I really enjoyed his analytical, like he really thinks about things. He writes a list of who he thinks the suspect is and things like that. So this book is all about this cruise that's going along the Nile, and you follow a slew of characters. Agatha Christie is kind of known for her locked door mysteries where somebody ends up dying and you're like in a secluded place where you can't leave. Think of Clue, you know, you're in this abandoned mansion. Think of it And Then There Were None, where you're in a house like in the middle of an island. You can't leave. You can't leave a cruise ship in the middle of the Nile. So basically we learn that Lynette Ridgway was shot and killed, and she was very beautiful, very rich as well, and Herculean is trying to figure out who exactly killed her. And also there's some more people that are dying on this cruise. Before you even get on this cruise, you learn backstories of a lot of these characters, like Lynette, like Joanna, like what else is her name? I forget the names. A lot of other characters, Simon, Jackie. You learn so much backstory behind them, so it makes you even more invested when I get on this cruise, and I just really enjoyed it. So I don't want to spoil it for you, but basically in this book, Lynette is very popular in the very beginning of the book. Like, everybody loves her, and her friend calls her up, Jackie, and she's like, look, I want to marry this guy. I love him so much, but he ain't got a lot of money, so can you give him a job so like we can finally get married and be together, and I have to marry him. And so her friend Lynette's like, you know, bring him up to my house and, you know, I'll meet him. And so that happens, and then you flash forward to the cruise, and turns out Lynette done stole Jackie's man, and she is now married to the guy. And I don't know why, I just love that, because this book takes place in 1937. Was not expecting that. In fact, my favorite part in this entire book, like Lynette's trying to confide in Herculean, and she's like, can you tell Jackie to just like leave? You know, you're a detective, you can do that. And he basically, like, she doesn't know, Lynette doesn't know that everybody knows that she stole Jackie's man, and he knows it because he kind of saw it firsthand. And so he basically confronts her, and he's like, look, not in these words obviously, he's like, look, you stole your friend's man. Like, what do you expect is gonna happen? And I swear, when I read the conversation that he had with her, the only thought I had was, yeah. That's exactly what I thought. I just was just like, man, like, I love the way Agatha Christie wrote this, where it's definitely steeped in kind of old language, because obviously it was different times. They used very different language in 1937, but I loved the whole mystery element to it. So I definitely want to read more Agatha Christie. I enjoyed it. I'm not a very big classics reader. I've read literally a handful, maybe like 2 handfuls at this point, but that's about it. But I loved Death on the Nile. I would give it a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed it. I could could see the ending coming. I was, you know, the more I read on, I was like, this is what I think happened, and it did happen, but I still enjoyed it. I loved each of the characters. I love how he figured out exactly what was going on. I love the twists and turns. It was just a fun mystery that I definitely would recommend. If you are weary of classics and you're like, I don't know, check out Agatha Christie books. I think they're easy to read, easy to digest, and I would recommend them. So there you have my thoughts and feelings on these 3 books. I'm happy to say I enjoyed all of them because my last recent reads, I enjoyed like none of the reads. So I'm glad we're shifting tone. So I have 2 5 stars and 1 4 star. I am not complaining by any means. Enjoyed them all, would recommend them all. Love that they're different genres, and love that I'm branching out this year because every time I branch out, it's a great reading year, and I always attest that to 2018 when I really branched out and read historical and horror, and I'm glad I'm doing the same thing this year because I'm really enjoying myself. If you've read any of these books, let me know. If I swayed you to read any of them, also let me know, and let me know if I, you know, maybe pushed you off on one. I would also love to know that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.